Good afternoon, everyone,
I'm Dirt.
and I'm Wilkins, and we welcome all of you back to Education Platform. Now, people who are visiting Education Platform, I hope you all get a lot of experience. Now, before we begin with our lessons for today, we're going to be reading a verse which is taken from John 3, verse 16. And it states that, For God so loved the world,
That He gave His only begotten Son,
that who shall ever believe in him,
shall not perish, but have everlasting
lasting life. The word of the Lord.
Amen.
Now, our first lesson today is about the Ku Klux Klan, also known as the KKK. The Ku Klux Klan is the group in the United States that helped to develop nativism, which they didn't want Northerners, such as black people, to enter the South. Now, what else to know about the Ku Klux Klan is that their symbol represents Christianity. See, the white cross represents Christianity, and the red blood represents drastic action, such as red blood. Now, their uniform color represents white people. Yeah, the weapons that are used by the KKK are listed, which are the KKK whip,
The pistol, firecrackers,
and roof nails.
Wow.
Now, next are the three branches of government. Now, the three branches of government are the legislative branch. The legislative branch is one of the branches of government
that is made up of House and Senate.
Next is the executive branch, is one of the branches of government that
Will enforce laws that were given to all citizens,
which they shall obey them. Last is the judicial branch, reviews the laws
from the executive branch.
Now, our third lesson is about the types of brass instruments. Now, the types of brass instruments are are listed, which are
Trumpet,
a tuba
saxophone,
and a trombone. These are the instruments that you blow into to make music. Next are fractions. Now, doing a review of fractions, such as for example of a fraction, there's 1/2 plus 1/2 equals a whole number. Also, to solve how to solve for fractions, you use the butterfly method, such as for multiplication. Yep, 4 times 2 is 8, and 5 times 3 is 15. Put them together, it equals to 15 over 8. Now, next is percussion instruments. Percussion instruments are the types of instruments that you hit or shake to make music, such as the examples: a drum,
a xylophone,
a cymbal,
cacaret, castanet,
maracas, and bongo drums.
Bongo.
Next are wind instruments. Wind instruments are the types of instruments that when you blow from the front and music comes from the end. Yep. The types of wind instruments are a flute,
clarinet,
and a recorder. The next lesson is how to draw the nose. Yeah, when you're drawing a nose on a sketch pad or on paper, first draw 3 circles that are different sizes. First, you start with the big circle, and the 2 circles which they are the same size. Next, then add the dimensions to form the nose. Then add darker colors to add the nostrils. Next is subject and predicate. Now, a subject is
tells what the sentence is about.
The predicate tells us something about the subject. Yeah. Next is poachers and poaching.
Illegal.
What we know about poaching is illegal hunting for animals,
such as hurting them or using them for your own purposes.
Yeah, poachers are illegal hunters searching for animals to make a fortune, or harming them.
And harming is bad.
Now, we're going to be reading to you an informative story about code switching. Learning how to code switch. No. Okay. Code switching is a term that describes how a speaker alternates between communication styles in different contexts.
In this informational text, Eric Deggans discusses his experiences, changing how he communicates based on the person he is interacting with and the culture he is navigating.
As you read, take notes on how Deegan Owen's experience with code switching contributed to the text. You guys doing anything today? That might sound like an ordinary, even dull question, but in my old neighborhood, mostly poor, entirely black, 70s era Gary, India, that kind of question was grounds for serious ridicule, or worse. The problem? I had dared use a word none of my partners ever let pass through their lips, unless they are making fun of a white person. Guys,
Okay. It was a word that had seeped into my speech patterns almost without thinking. I reached the 5th grade when my mother sent me to a white dominated private school outside our neighborhood. That word, guys, might earn smiles and nods of understanding in that world, but brought the ultimate insult in my neighborhood. You sound like them white boys you go to school with. You know that? My friends would say, with a tone parked somewhere between amused disdain and outright disgust. We were talking like them white boys.
At age 10, I hadn't yet mastered an important tool to solve my struggles, code switching. For linguists, code switching describes the simple act of switching between two languages in a conversation. But in today's increasingly multicultural, multiethnic society, the term's deeper meaning involves shifting between different cultures as you move through life's conversations, choosing your communication style based on the people you're dealing with. It's the reason why some black people speak with more grammatical attention when in all white settings, especially at work, but their slang hang out. When among friends or mostly black people,
it's just not a black thing. Children of Boston who live in the Southie accent when they visit the old neighborhood of and Oklahoma kids who sound a bit more down among the Southerners do it too.
To understand how confusing this is for folks who don't code switch, just consider the reaction of Fox News Channel personalities Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity. Both men seem mystified when presidential candidate Barack Obama showed off his tendency to adopt more preacherly cadence when speaking to a mostly black audience in a 2007 speech. This accent is absurd. Carlson concluded in a segment on Hannity's program last October, President Obama's altered speech as evidence of pandering. This is a put-on, except for those of us who practice code switching every day. It is anything but. Equal parts fitting and making sure you're understood.
Oh, and making your understand code switching comes as naturally as to me breathing. 38 years later, a transition, and I'm sure our first black president has also mastered. Still, it was a long road getting there, with stumbling blocks and surprising places. For example, not long after I learned to rain, I used the G word. I got a lesson in politeness from a white friend who agreed to do something even he probably wouldn't want to do.
In my world, people were almost never that polite, but among white people, I missed the subtle signals that might reveal that my friend didn't want to offend, and I took his reactions at face value, which only led to resentment for him later. Worse, I had even tougher time judging the reactions of my white friends' parents, some of whom weren't all that sure they wanted a black kid from a tough neighborhood hanging out in their home, but weren't quite sure how to say no either.
There was a lot of canceled appointments and last-minute emergencies. With one boy in particular, my mother had me sit down and explain. Son, perhaps it's another reason why his parents keep making excuses of why we can't get together. Painful as some of these experiences were, I was grateful to have them in middle school and high school, so that when the time hit for college, I already had some fluency navigating between different cultures to make my life more interesting. I had a small crew of Latino friends from my hometown that I also spent time with in college. Enjoy getting to know another group that who were such like young African Americans in some ways too different than others. I watched too many others from my hometown and predominantly black cities struggle in a university setting, where suddenly they really were minority.
For these kids, being members of a mandatory group as an abstraction, because everywhere they turned in their own lives, from school to the corner store and their own street corners, they were surrounded by others who looked and acted like them. I used to tell my private school classmates that, before I joined their world, the only time I saw white people outside of a department store or gas station was when they got lost driving through my neighborhood. But once these students left those mostly black neighborhoods for top colleges, such as Indiana University, Purdue University, or Notre Dame, they were suddenly surrounded by a culture they hadn't experienced firsthand, on top of the normal pressures of leaving home and family to take that ramped up academic challenge. They had to learn how to navigate white social structures while retaining their own sense of what it meant to be black. I learned early on, thanks to the G-word nonsense, that expertly navigating from culture was a rejection of where I'd come from, or a signal that I was any less authentically black. And returning to my roots wasn't being phony or pretending, but a put on. It was being fully who I am. This is a lesson to many other young people from too many other cultures have to learn the hard way, make their way in an American culture that too often still demands assimilation and marginalization. As more cultures join America's melting point, or melting pot, that's why code switching remains so valuable.
It's a reminder to be fully who you are at all times, making sure you understand well enough to be valued, respected, and considered.
Now, reading this text, it informs you about code switching, so that it can help you in the future. Now, before we go, we have advice to give. Even though you're rising up to a challenge and it seems hard, at first you don't succeed, try again. And also, our Christmas special is coming up soon. It's an event you do not want to miss. Thank you and happy holidays!